All right, and we're good. Go ahead.
Thank you guys for joining. We all survived the first week of 2021. That in itself is a feat, you know. We're going to talk about basically what this cohort kind of includes, what we're going to do, the approach we're going to take, how we're going to communicate with each other, and kind of the next steps to kind of get everything kind of kicked off. You can kind of go to the next slide now. As you guys know me, I'm super structured and super formal and super strict. So no questions. Yeah. Please feel free to ask questions. There'll be things I forget that we'll tell you guys about later in the presentation, or we're going to be talking about stuff in our one-on-one this weekend as well. So if you have questions and you don't bring them up today, or you think them later, no worries. And we also obviously always have Slack too to kind of keep chatting away. Next slide, please. So what this cohort is really around, the methodology that we're going to be using is not around diets, challenges, cleanses, whatever you kind of want to call it. Those are fun, sure, right? But they're all kind of temporary, because when the diet ends, yes, we've had our fun. We might have picked up one or two small skills, but nothing that's kind of really sustainable. So after it's kind of over, we kind of go back to exactly what we were doing, because all we kind of did was focus on that specific challenge. Usually for the challenge, the first week or two, it's rah, this is so much fun. The third or fourth week, or however many weeks it is, you're just kind of trying to hold out into the challenge and be like, oh my God, when's this freaking challenge going to go? When's it going to end? And for example, the 800 gram challenge was a lot of fun, but how many habits did we pick up after that? Maybe a couple small ones, but are we as dedicated and consistent right now as we were kind of trying to be during that challenge? Probably not. Most of those diets, cleanses, programs, or whatever are outcome focused, because they kind of really only follow that or focus on that result. So it might be eating the 800 grams, losing a specific amount of pounds, 20 pounds within a month, don't eat specific things, whatever it might be. All of that is really kind of focused on external factors and cues. So you look at numbers, you look at scales, you look at sizes, and yeah, temporarily things might get okay. But since you didn't learn how to be mindful, how to be consistent, what you're ready, willing, and able to do every single day, we kind of go exactly to the norm. So for this cohort, if we go to the next slide.
Can I just add that real quick, Robin?
Yeah, please go ahead.
One of the things that I think is interesting is for something that's very outcome focused, where it's here's the goal, I'm trying to get here, and that's sort of the only thing you're holding up. Then you are setting yourself up for this sort of very narrow, failure or success kind of duality. And there's only two things that can happen at the end, right? You can either have 100% success or you just fail. And I think one of the things that this is built to do is that even if, we're going to talk about goals, we're going to talk about where we're trying to get to, but even if some of those work in ways that we weren't necessarily thinking about in the beginning, there should be lots of success along the way, maybe sometimes in things that we didn't even think about, right? So the goal here is to have lots of smaller internal things where we can say wow, that was a really valuable lesson I learned, something I can take forward. If we do that, that should add up to that larger success that we're looking for. But even if that success, takes longer than we thought it would, or looks different by the time we get there, we should have a lot of kind of momentum on the way there. So let me go to the next slide. There we go.
So exactly opposite of outcome is really we want to work on behaviors. To work on behaviors, we need to practice habits. So habits to the rescue. We want to work on systems over outcomes. If we focus on building and understanding new systems and processes, we will achieve what we want naturally. We'll achieve our outcomes, but we're focusing on those small habits and behaviors. If you kind of think about it, The quote in Atomic Habits is, your current habits are perfectly designed to deliver your current results. So what we're going to be practicing over this 3 months for the various habits that we're practicing is how to change your habits, how to change your routines to get the results that we want. We keep doing the same, we're going to get the same results. So we need to figure out a way that's healthy and life sustainable, and changing our behavior to achieve those results. So this approach is based on building habits in a healthy and sustainable approach, not fighting against natural likes, desires, patterns. And if you kind of think about it, think about an ice cube, right? An ice cube melts at 32 degrees. Maybe when you first get the ice cube is at 25 degrees. You're going to work on those habits. The temperature might change to 26 degrees, might change to 27 degrees. You don't see the outcome just yet. It doesn't mean you aren't putting in the work, but then eventually you'll see the results and that ice cube will start to melt. I love that analogy because it kind of gives you a frame of reference where you're putting in the work, and yeah, you may not see the outcome immediately, but that's okay because you're creating habits is slow, sustainable, and then eventually you'll be able to kind of build those outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah. One of the things I like about the behavioral side of this is that this kind of approach is a lot about curiosity and a lot about sort of like naming and noticing. So it leaves a lot of room for you to say, why do I do this? Why is, this, food super enticing for me, right? Or something like that. And it doesn't necessarily say, don't do it, right? The goal is to understand that behavior, to understand it better, whether it's like, oh, I do that because every time after, swimming practice when I was a kid, we would eat X and like that's what I'm just used to, right? Or, it's something that me and my family would make every time X. And by understanding that and kind of putting a name to that a little more, it's not about necessarily changing the behavior. It's about understanding it better so that you have a better idea to kind of like throttle on, throttle off, or to kind of make decisions about when you want, when that behavior is the most sort of useful or attractive for you. All right.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on that, that noticing name is mostly just being aware, because otherwise, if you're not aware, how do you really change that habit? So just bringing awareness to yourself makes you more cognizant, in order to be able to change it. If we're not aware of something, we're not able to really kind of change it. So there are many habits we can practice. The first 6 are the 6 that we're going to consider the foundational ones, are what we're going to be practicing during this cohort. Each practice will be 2 weeks in duration. So the 6 habits are: take a 5-minute action, eat enough protein, hydrate properly, eat enough vegetables, eat enough carbs, and eat enough fats. So what does that all mean? So the first one, take a 5-minute action. This is the first habit we're going to be practicing over the first 2 weeks, and I'll send you guys the initial practice information, and we'll talk about it in your first intro session on Saturday and Sunday, depending on when you guys have scheduled it. Cassie and I already spoke about it yesterday. So what a take 5-minute action is introduction to fitting in a new change into your life. It covers how to practice creating a new habit into your routine. And this will be the foundation for practicing how to create habits specific to protein, hydration, vegetables, carbs, and fats. So we'll learn how to practice habits and then also kind of lead up and get us prepared for those nutrient-specific habits that are coming up. From there, we will talk about eat enough protein. What does that mean? What is a protein? What's not a protein? What's enough for me? Start to be more aware of when you eat protein. And we'll work on a habit on trying to get, at least I would say, focus on one small portion of protein. For habits, we always want to focus on small chunks. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew. Otherwise, it's very hard to be consistent. If we take on too much, and you kind of see that a lot with New Year's goals or resolutions people make, they'll take on way too much. They'll be like, I want to go to the gym. They go to the gym 7 days a week. After the novelty wears off, 3 or 4 weeks from now, are you really going to be able to sustain that? So at first, when you start all these habits, it might seem really simple, and that's okay, because a week or 2 or 3 weeks in, we want simple, because the more complicated we make it be, the harder it's going to be to kind of keep that up. So we will talk about that individually for eat enough protein, how to be hydrated properly, how to be aware if you're hydrated or not, eat enough vegetables. This is usually a common challenge for many folks. And remember, all we're doing is looking to be better and consistent. We're not robots. We're not trying to be perfect. For each of these habits, you're just trying to be a little bit better compared to where we are right now. And then we'll do the same thing with kind of carbs and fats.
One of the things that I found really interesting with this approach when I did it with my coach was the idea of enough, right? In the past, and I've done every diet, nutrition challenge, this, that, under the sun. It's always been very prescriptive. It's always been like, all right, here's what it is. It's this much, this many grams per pound of your body weight, or this, that, or whatever. And one of the things that I think is really interesting with this is that enough is going to be different for everybody, right? And that is both, that's what we're talking about with external and internal, right? Is that some of this is going to be stuff based on, gender and body weight and activity level and this, that, and the other, goals, stuff like that. But some of it is just like, oh man, I've been trying to eat this much protein and it just feels like a whole lot for me. And it's like, okay, well, maybe enough is less than that, right?
Right.
So that is as valid as anything else. And the goal is to kind of figure out, and sometimes maybe practice like something that you're not used to. But if it is counter to your being, right? Or if there is some like big reason why that's not working, is to figure kind of out like, why is that? Why, and how do we, sort of like wrap that into what enough means for you, to kind of like feel your best, perform your best, do your best kind of with this approach.
Yeah. In addition to enough, like what are you ready, willing, and able to do? Just because someone calls something a superfood, or something looks good in some ad, doesn't mean that that's something that you necessarily like and want. Like I've done it many times. I'll be like, oh, this ingredient is really good for me. I go to the grocery store, I buy it, it sits in my fridge. What am I going to do with it? So we'll kind of talk about strategies around that. And it could be, again, better, not perfect. It could be maybe there's something else that's not that super, whatever they're calling a superfood, that is still better than whatever you're doing right now and you enjoy it, right? So just baby steps for everything. So this might be a little hard to see, but let me try to double click this.
Zoom in. No.
No worries. So what we're going to be focusing on is that first chunk. It'll be a little hard to see. I can send you guys this presentation after, which is the take 5-minute action, eat enough protein, vegetables, carbs, fats, and hydration. But there are a bunch of habits that we can practice after this cohort is over. Like I said, this is really the foundation ones that we're kind of talking about. Other habits we can look at is choosing higher quality of proteins, fats, carbs. Maybe we can swap some out and still enjoy what we're eating. Maybe we need to work on sleep. Maybe we need to work on stress. Maybe we need to work about being more mindful of how we're eating, being more eat slowly. There's so many different habits we can kind of practice. And some of this will come naturally as a part of these first 6 habits, but there's opportunity for us to even focus more on it later. So for this cohort, what's included? So 2 in-body scans. What we'll do is when y'all come in tomorrow or Sunday, we'll do the initial in-body scan, and then we'll do 1 in-body scan at the end. Remember the goal, obviously we would like the needle to move, but we don't want to focus too much on that number, because what we want to try to focus on is how do we feel? Do we feel like we're being consistent? That outcome and our results will naturally come as long as we put those systems and routines in place. But let's just have something to measure against for even if it's not 3 months, some future point in the later this year or next year or whatever. You'll have a dedicated coach for all 6 weeks. So that'll be me. Noah will be available as well in the Slack channel. We'll have a dedicated channel for all of us. You guys might have seen I added you. I didn't type anything in there, so I'm not sure if you saw that yet. Just as like, yep, I saw. That's where we'll doing most of our communication. So that's where I'll pass on the practice information. That's where we'll chat, share what we're doing with each other, ask questions. Whenever you guys have questions, throw the questions in that Slack channel. I'm sure other people have the same exact questions. Plus, maybe you get a great idea for something else from what somebody else posts. So do someone else a favor and kind of post something. So the 6 habit practices will also have a daily habit check-in form. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then every 2 weeks, we'll have a bi-weekly reflect and ready check-in. So what that is we'll reflect on the practice that we are completing for those 2 weeks, and then we'll talk about preparing for the upcoming practice. So we'll have our check-in not next weekend, but the weekend after that. Every 2 weeks, we'll have a little check-in. And we can probably just do that virtually. That'll kind of make it easier for everyone. And I'll use Calendly, and that'll make the process a little more streamlined. We'll also have a bunch of resources. So I'm going to show you where that is in a moment as well. You'll have access to all of the resources for each practice. But each week, I'll specifically point out some resources for some things to consider as you're practicing that habit. But you're always more than welcome to read more resources if you want. And none of the resources are mandatory. Don't feel like you have to read them if your day's busy. No problem. But they do have some good nuggets of information in there. So if you can, spend a few minutes to kind of read them. They're all pretty digestible, so it's not too bad. So the forms, apps, etc., the tools that we'll be using the daily habit check-in form. We'll use the review and ready bi-weekly process. We'll be using Slack for all of our communication. We'll use Google Drive for access to for the resources, as well as the daily habit check-in form. Oh, sorry, did you say something now?
I'm trying to show the form, but I don't know if it's working.
Oh, okay, no worries. I can bring that up in a second if you steal. And then in-body scans, and then what I would suggest is, if you're comfortable, take a picture. You don't have to share the picture if you're not comfortable, but take a picture of yourself as a before. Take a picture after this cohort ends or 6 months down the line. Sometimes we can't always notice the change ourselves because we obviously see ourselves every single day. And you'll see this a lot of times when you visit family and relatives, be like, oh my God, you look so different. And you don't really realize that. Taking a picture of yourself kind of helps you visualize the changes that you kind of see. So, this weekend, go ahead, take a picture of yourself. And then at the end of the 3 months, take another picture, see how you look and feel. And then maybe just set a reminder in your calendar every 3 months. Just take a little picture of yourself, see how it's going. That way you can kind of visually see how you look. And then let me try to steal control from you.
I can do it, Robin. I got it.